You are watching In Conversation This Week with Miceal O'Hurley.
Thank you for watching another episode of In Conversation This Week with Miceal O'Hurley. Diplomacy in Ireland, the European Diplomat, is here today to talk to Her Excellency Ms. Anna Sochańska, the Polish Ambassador to Ireland. Madam Ambassador, welcome.
Good morning, Miceal. Thank you for this opportunity.
Madam Ambassador, we meet at a grave time. There's a humanitarian crisis on the Belarus-Polish border. Tell me about that.
Yes, Miceal, let me start by saying that this crisis was deliberately and artificially created by Lukashenko's regime. You can think about objectives of Lukashenko. I could mention some of them. One would be to destabilize the region and destabilize the European Union. The other one, to force the European Union to cancel the sanctions imposed on Belarus. The other one could be to take revenge on Poland and other countries of the region like Lithuania or Latvia for their efforts to support Belarusian opposition and for making a case of democratic Belarus on international fora. In my view, he failed in all of those objectives because, first of all, the European Union will adopt the fifth set of sanctions against the regime. If he wanted to show that there is no unity within the framework of the European Union or NATO, he failed again. Because our partners in the EU and our allies in NATO, they support Poland in her efforts to defend the border. What is also important is that this is the hybrid war with all characteristics of this kind of war. So, just playing with emotions, disinformation, or attacking values. We witness all those elements in this case.
Madam Ambassador, Karl von Clausewitz, a 18th century militarist and philosopher, said that war is an extension of government policy by other means. Is it the Lukashenko regime, if not Russia as well, to wage war, even cyber warfare, disinformation, hybrid warfare, against the West? Do you believe that it is their posture and their desire?
Unfortunately, that's my opinion. And we have evidence that, as I mentioned before, this hybrid war was orchestrated both by Belarus and Russia. Those poor people who you find now at the border, close to the Polish border, you see they paid lots of money to come to Minsk. Then they were transported to the border just to learn there is no way they could legally cross the border with Poland and with the European Union at the same time. I have to remind that our eastern border is not only our national border, but also eastern border of NATO and the EU. So there is no way that you could legally go to Poland and then go to Germany, as many of them want, without any legitimate right to do it.
Madam Ambassador, I spoke to two Iraqi Kurds yesterday in Belarus. They were just outside of the border, trying to access the European Union through Poland. They say they were enticed to fly to Minsk. Their flight was paid for, and they were told that the Polish government had guaranteed a safe passage corridor to Germany. Was that ever offered by the Polish government?
You can only cross the border when you declare that you're a refugee and you want to be granted international protection. And I would really like to underline here, because there are so many fake news that Polish border guards treat those poor people in a bad manner. I would like to say that anybody who asks for asylum will be granted the status of an asylum seeker, and the procedure will start. But those who try to illegally cross border, they will not be allowed to come to Poland or any other European countries.
I want to make absolutely clear on this point, Madam Ambassador. Are you telling me that Poland will honor its obligations to process refugees in accordance with the International Tribunal standards and its commitments to the EU?
Absolutely. Poland, as any other EU country, applies all those procedures. I mean, what you need to have a declaration from those people who want to be regarded as refugees. But what we witness now at the border, there are lots of migrants who say that they simply want to go to Germany. They don't want to be regarded as refugees. That's the difference. Because in the media coverage, sometimes you hear the stories of people who are wrongly treated by the Polish guards because they need an assistance and international protection. Those who declare they need assistance and international protection will get it.
Madam Ambassador, I appreciate you accepting my invitation to speak with you so that you could set the record straight on a number of points. I'm concerned that some of my colleagues in the media have been shaping this story by calling the migrants victims, by saying they're caught between two countries, by even saying that Poland has erected concertina wire, barbed wire to keep immigrants out. What is Poland doing differently today than they have been doing to safeguard its borders?
Thank you very much for this question. First of all, Michal, I really agree with those who say that those people are victims. They are, because they were deceived by the regime. They paid lots of money, as I said at the very beginning of our conversation, just to come to the border and learn that they cannot go further. So they are victims, and I'm really sorry for them. The problem is that now at the border we have a very dramatic situation. There are thousands of people who are very much frustrated, tired, because they were deceived, and they behave in an aggressive way towards our border guards and soldiers. At the moment, we have around 20,000 border guards, soldiers, and policemen who protect the border. We decided to construct a 180 kilometers fence along the border, and we also introduced the emergency state. One has to understand that it's not only the Polish eastern border, but it's also the eastern flank of NATO and the European Union. So we have an obligation to protect this border. So that's what we are doing. Now, as I said, the situation is very dramatic because the migrants on the side of Belarus, and here I underline, there is no man's land. The border is a line. You have one country on one side, the other country on the other side. Those people are in Belarus. They are not stuck in between. So this is the Belarus who created the problem, and the Belarus who should be responsible for solving this problem.
Let me parse this if I can, Madam Ambassador. The migrants continually chant, scream, even throwing projectiles at the Polish border guards, and I believe injuring some of the Polish border guards, that they should be let in to the European Union. As one Sky News reporter said, they have more faith in the EU than they should. Does the EU have a responsibility to keep the borders from being fluid?
Of course, the EU has responsibility, and as you know, there is a special EU agency, Frontex, located in Warsaw, by the way. This agency is responsible for securing the external borders of the European Union. But of course, Frontex has only thousands of border guards for the whole of the European Union. That is why some people sometimes they keep asking us, why aren't you asking for support from Frontex? How can we ask for support when we have only 20,000 our people at the border, and Frontex has 1,000 people for the whole of the EU. Of course, Frontex is very helpful because it provides lots of important analysis for us, and we cooperate very well. Recently, a director of Frontex visited Polish border, and he congratulated the Polish authorities and the Polish border guards for their professionalism. So, of course, we all have an obligation to protect our borders. But what I would like to underline is that we have to really realistic. And we have to distinguish between the refugees and economic migrants. In this case, we have lots of economic migrants. Of course, if it happens that there are refugees in this group, we will provide assistance as much as necessary. And also in cases of some incidents, when people illegally crossed the Polish border and they needed help because of, difficult health conditions, Polish authorities provided this assistance.
Not long ago, the EU agreed on what's known as the Dublin Protocol, that people ask for asylum and start the refugee application process in the first country they set foot in. Is Belarus responsible to process their applications as asylum seekers as opposed to Poland?
Well, they should be responsible for that. But the point is that as we discussed earlier on, the people who are at the border right now, they were deceived by the regime. So Lukashenko tries to play the game and tries to make Poland and other countries of the European Union responsible for this crisis. The problem again is that if those people decided to apply for a refugee status in Poland, they would be obliged to stay in Poland for at least, 6 months, because this is the procedure. That's where a problem lies, because they don't want to stay in Poland, because they declare they would like to go to Germany, where you have more generous policy vis-a-vis refugees. So you could ask yourself whether it's the real intention of those majority of those people who you find now close to the Polish border. Are they really refugees, or are they just economic migrants who want to go to Germany or the Netherlands?
Clearly, Lukashenko has sought to instrumentalize or weaponize migrants to punish Europe for the sanctions that were imposed after he sent a fighter jet to down an Irish Ryanair commercial flight, making it deviate from its course to Lithuania to land in Minsk, only to arrest a journalist who was an opponent of his regime. He threatened to flood Europe with refugees. Is this him making good on that promise?
I think he will fail with all those promises. That's what he wanted to do. But we proved that we are very united and professional, and we know what's behind. That this is a very evil and artificial policy vis-a-vis those migrants. What I would also like to say that about this revenge, he not only wants to take a revenge because of the sanctions, but he also is very angry with Poland Lithuania, Latvia, other countries who criticize his policy vis-à-vis democratic opposition in Belarus. I would like to remind that there are over 800 political prisoners in Belarus, and 30 journalists and people working for media are in jail. We cannot be silent about it. We have to be really vocal, and we should not give up.
I had the opportunity earlier this year to interview Ms. Sochańska, who was an opponent of the Lukashenko regime in the last election, and by all accounts won the election, only to have the Lukashenko regime steal the election. He's the last known dictator in Europe. Last week, he cemented a relationship with Russia, and it was signed only days ago with Vladimir Putin. And afterwards, he said that the Belarusian military and the Russian military are one. The countries will be united. Can we talk about Lukashenko's actions without also talking about Russia's actions?
Of course we can't, and thank you very much for raising this issue. Of course, they signed a decree on so-called Treaty of Union State. There will be 28 programs of implementation that will follow this integration. This is quite unfortunate. You also referred to Sochańska, and I was just thinking, what will happen in the future when I hope one day Belarus will have a democratically elected president and government? Will this government be happy with this union? Now, Lukashenko, as illegitimate president, is going to have the union with Russia. This is what is this saying about his real intentions? I think this is we should also look at this situation in a broader context. Because of course now we all focus on the situation in Belarus and also in Poland, but let us not forget about Ukraine, our other neighbor, who was so dramatically affected by a very aggressive Russian policy, Crimea, Donbass. It's quite I would say scary when we see the military buildup of Russia at the border with Ukraine. We have to be very vigilant and very supportive for our neighbor Ukraine, because it seems to me that Russian politics, not only vis-à-vis the neighbors, but also other countries and regions in the world, again shows that Russia is interested in creation small conflicts everywhere, just to attract attention to those small conflicts and then doing other things in more strategic places. So again, the kind of divide et impera approach by Russia.
Let me paint a picture if I can. We have a significant military buildup on the Ukrainian border at present. It not only includes combat-ready troops, heavy armor and artillery, but significant logistical support streams that would indicate that it is ready for an incursion across the Ukrainian border. At the same time, Putin's partner, Lukashenko, is putting pressure on Poland, pitting Europe against itself, or at least hoping Europe will pit itself against each other. What in these very dangerous times can be done to reduce the tension in Europe?
I think the most important thing is just to be united. The European Union proved that by adopting the sanctions against Lukashenko, but also by its policy of supporting civil society and democratic opposition in this country. we have also the aspect of kind of hard security and the position of NATO that was very clear. And you see, in Poland, we are discussing if we should invoke the Article 4 of NATO, which is based on consultations. In fact, we've already had consultations with all our important partners, and for example, we will also have some British soldiers coming to Poland, also to help Polish soldiers and policemen in securing the border. We should be simply united, and we should use all necessary instruments to show our opponents that it's not so easy to kind of dismantle this European construction, Euro-Atlantic construction. And you see, I think for the time being, we are quite successful. And I would also like to underline that the presence of 20,000 Polish troops at the border, the people who are absolutely dedicated, they are patriots, they are well equipped, well trained, and with very high morale. It's also a very important message to Belarus and Russia.
When I spoke with Ms. Sochańska earlier this year, and I heard her comments yesterday, they're remarkably consistent. She doesn't want to see sanctions on the Belarusian people because it's they that suffer, and yet it's necessary to bring down the Lukashenko regime. She was concerned that previous sanction regimes weren't tough enough. There were too many loopholes, and Belarus continued to operate as normal. Do you think the new sanctions will be tough enough to actually have an impact on the regime as well as the Belarusian people?
Yeah, let me start by saying, first of all, that I very admire Madam Tichanowska, and I had the honor to meet her here in Ireland, because, as you know, she has a very good connection with the Ireland. And she's a very consistent lady and a very brave person. What you've just said reminded me the situation in Poland during the communist time, when America imposed sanctions on communist Poland. And that was quite similar, because ordinary Polish people supported those sanctions, even though they were kind of suffering because of them, but they understood that it's not against them, but it's against the regime. So I understand her perfectly well. It's hard to say. One could say that we could do more. We could focus on some goods that Belarus export to the European Union. Who knows what will happen next? I think we can now rely on the knowledge and experience of our leaders, and we will see if those sanctions work. For the time being, I think we have to observe the situation. But it's very interesting when you referred to her words and how and her understanding of the situation. It's not against the people. In fact, it's against the regime.
I'm very much concerned that when we talk about Lukashenko, we're talking about Putin. And when we're talking about Putin, we're talking about Lukashenko. They have chosen to integrate with one another. Lukashenko's reliance on Russian money is significant enough that he's basically become a lackey of the Moscow apparatus. The real danger here is that Putin creates problems, small scale, as you say, everywhere, as we've observed. And yet, the European Union continues to meet with him, talk with him. He's the solution to the problem he creates. Lukashenko now is the master of this situation with the Polish border, in which he's weaponized human beings. It's really up to him to provide the humanitarian care they need and return them to their homeland if they aren't true asylum seekers. Is there a danger that we continually play the same sheet music every time Russia wants Europe to dance, and they create a problem, and then we ask them to solve it, and therefore they become heroes, even in their own country, if not amongst some people in Europe. How can we change the paradigm?
I think the solution could seem really simple. The European leaders should not agree with the Russian approach to the European Union, not as the unity, but as a kind of composition of different member states. Because this is what Russia is doing. Russia picks up some member states of the European Union and it tries to establish relations with them bilaterally, instead of talking and regarding the European Union as the unit, as the family of democratic nations. Unless this situation is changed, we will face this kind of discrepancy. We have to approach our policy vis-à-vis Russia as the European Union. So this is, I think, the best solution when we talk with Russia.
Russia has long used a divide and conquer tactic. Lately, it's been used with gas supplies to Europe. The Nord Stream 2 project was divisive because it not only concentrated so much power in the hands of Gazprom and Russia, but it also punished Ukraine in depriving it of transit fees. Europe would become overly reliant on Russia with Nord Stream 2 online. Were you heartened to see that Germany had suspended certification of the pipeline yesterday?
Yeah, as you know, from the very beginning, when some European states started to talk with Russia about this unfortunate project, we were strongly against. Because, of course, we are of the opinion that you need to have diversification of gas supply. And as you referred to Ukraine, depriving it from the transit of gas means that this country is really in a very difficult situation. So, of course, anything that would provide solution that would create diversity of supply of different sources of energy would be very welcome by Poland.
You talk about unity. I'm very much concerned that only last month, Putin threatened to reduce gas supplies to Moldova, starve it in what, by all accounts, forecasters say will be a very cold winter. Within a week, Moldova signed a new gas agreement with Russia. Germany desperately needs the gas, having shut down its nuclear supplies. Germany now faces higher gas prices. All of Europe does. Russia's been starving the pipeline of gas to drive up prices, which creates cash revenue for them that blunts the effect of all of the sanctions, all while stirring the pot in Europe. What can Europe do with energy policy to help ensure that Europe is more secure from this kind of manipulation?
Mm-hmm. I would just give you the example of Polish policy vis-à-vis the energy supply. We built LNG in northwestern Poland. We signed agreement with Norway and Denmark regarding Baltic pipe supply of gas. So we also cooperate with the United States in terms of also liquid gas import. So I think each and every country and together the European Union should focus on such alternative ways of providing energy sources. any monopoly, in this case Russian monopoly on gas supply, is dangerous, because then we will completely rely on Russian supply of gas, and Russia will use it, as you said, rightly so. This is so-called Russian gas diplomacy.
Madam Ambassador, right before we sat down, you had some reports from what's occurring at the Polish border. Can you tell me about that?
Yes, of course. A couple of days ago, there were like 4,000 or 5,000 migrants on the Belarus side. Today, in the morning, our border guards noticed that those people moved somewhere, and there are like now 1,000, 2,000 people left. The rest moved in a company of secret service or soldiers from Belarus, somewhere to the forest. Our border guards noticed several buses that probably would transport those people to other places. We don't know where, but the situation has dramatically changed. One reason for that could be that Belarus realized that it is not possible to carry out the assault on the Polish border because it's very well protected. But they may have some other reasons for transferring those people to another place.
So we have the Polish-EU border, and it is the Polish-EU border. The reduction in the number of migrants pressing at the border has been observed. Open source reporting, that is, Belarus people use their phones, their cameras, and send over information over the internet, seem to indicate that the trucks may be moving towards the northern border between Belarus and Ukraine, probing that border to cause more instability. What can be done to help Ukraine in as much as it's not an EU member?
Well, it's not the EU member, but of course Ukraine is also a strategic partner for the European Union as a part of this initiative called Eastern Partnership. But Ukraine also cooperates with the NATO. So I think that Ukraine should expect assistance from both of those organizations. Moreover, Poland will take over the presidency in OSCE next year. There was already a debate on this forum, debate related to the situation in Belarus, but of course it should be broader. As you rightly mentioned, if there is a risk of a crisis again in Ukraine, we should be really vigilant and very serious. And I think it should not only be EU who should help Ukraine, but also NATO should send a strong signal. And we have platforms of cooperation with Ukraine also within the framework of NATO. So I think this should be a very strong message from NATO in this respect.
Russia has continued to use its policy of causing disturbances domestically within Europe with disinformation campaigns, and physically with armed services. That is the buildup that happened right before the invasion of Georgia, the buildup that's happened twice this year on the Ukrainian border, the seizure of Transnistria in Moldova. I'm not saying that every Russian military buildup ends up in an invasion, but there hasn't been an invasion without a military buildup. Ukraine has been part of Europe for over 1,000 years. Do you believe that it's a mistake for Europe to continue to allow Putin's presence in the illegal occupation of Donbass and the attempted annexation of Crimea to be a barrier towards Ukraine joining the European Union?
Well, it's a broader issue, I would say, because for many years I was responsible in the Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs for EU enlargement, and I know how difficult this is. At the moment, Ukraine is not in the basket, if I may say so, because these are Western Balkan countries that have so-called European vocation. In theory, Turkey, in theory, because, negotiations are not going on, but officially Turkey is also a candidate for the EU, to be a EU member. So Ukraine is not regarded at all at the moment as a candidate for the EU membership. However, in our opinion, in the opinion of Poland, Ukraine should have this perspective open. As you said, it's a European country. In the treaties, it's written that any European country can apply. But the situation is very complex. Sometimes the European institutions and some EU member states are not that keen even to open the door to Western Balkan states. So what about Ukraine? It's really difficult even to predict that one day some countries of the European Union will agree at all to grant Ukraine a candidate status. But of course, from our perspective, it would be the best message.
You talk about unity being the best defense for the EU. Migration is a problem from North Africa, where Spain still has territorial access. Greece has suffered with migration problems. What can the EU do with migration that would have helped Poland in this situation and will help other countries tomorrow? Because I doubt that this kind of tactic will be abandoned by Russia because it proves so useful to them.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a long-term solution. From the very beginning of this migration crisis, 2015, Poland and other countries of the European Union, we were not alone. We were of the opinion that European Union should focus more on the assistance for the countries of origin and transit. So to be more active and more present and to dedicate more assistance funds in those countries, not to artificially introduce a kind of relocation quotas. Because as you now see at the Polish-Belarusian border, there are people who don't want to stay in Poland. They want to go to Germany and, to Sweden, to the Netherlands. You cannot artificially say that 700 or 7,000 people will go to this country or that country if they don't want to go there. Would it be in accordance with human rights? I'm not sure of that. So I think our opinion on that has not changed. We think that, and actually Polish humanitarian assistance has dramatically increased, and we send our experts and we dedicate special funds in those countries who are countries of origin and transit. And this is, in my view and in view of my ministry, should be the EU policy when it comes to migration and migration crisis.
We've only got a couple of minutes left, so I'd like to ask you some quick questions if I can. A lot was made last month of Polexit, Poland's desire to leave the European Union. I've not heard a Polish person yet tell me that they want to leave the European Union. Tell me about this brouhaha.
Yes, of course, first of all, I have to say that it's a fake news, that it was a political slogan because it sounds good, Polexit. You see, in a country which is so much dedicated to Europe, European cooperation, European values, where you have 90% of people who are very happy being both Polish and the European Union, it would be quite strange to talk about Polexit. We have some issues with the European Commission. I'm sure they will be solved soon. But Polish government is maybe it's a Euro-pragmatic, but it's not anti-European. And we are very valuable members of the European Union, and we want to be part of this family of democratic nations.
Madam Ambassador, I want to thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure and very informative. If diplomacy in Ireland, the European Diplomat, can ever be of assistance, please let us know. This is Miceal O'Hurley. You've been watching In Conversation this week. We've had as our guest the Polish ambassador. Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador. We'll see you soon.
Thank you very much, Michael. That was a great pleasure. Thank you for this opportunity.